Hey everyone. Before I get into these stories, I need to give you all a warning. These stories are very dark and very graphic. These stories are not for the faint of heart. I didn't really have time to write out every timestamp for every single story, but I did include the timestamps if you want to skip the stories involving children and the very awful tragedies that they went through. I'll have those in a pinned comment down below. I also want to say thank you and offer my respect to all the amazing emergency workers out there. Going through the things they go through is absolutely horrible. All that being said, if you're all ready, let's begin. I'm an EMT, or I should say I was an EMT. I work for a hospital that services for multiple counties, considering it's more of a rural area with small cities. This happened in winter, and the counties we service received tons of rain. Many of the schools were canceled because of flooding, and many people were encouraged to stay indoors. About a week later, temperatures drop, and we receive a call during the day. We arrive on the scene of a car collision on a small back road curve. In one truck, a teenage boy had small injuries, with his truck flipped on the side. And in the other car, a mother and her 3 children. Apparently the mother was speeding and hit a patch of black ice and lost control, hitting the truck in the other lane. The mother and her son in the passenger seat weren't wearing seatbelts and were thrown out of the car. They were pronounced dead on the scene. The other 2 kids in the car left with mild injuries. I quit my job a week later. All I ask of you is to always wear your seatbelt. It may save your life. So I'd like to start off by saying that my dad is a cop. I asked him what case had bothered him the most, and he told me this story. I had a call for a house fire, and I wasn't the person on scene. The house was engulfed in flames, and there was a woman outside who was hysterical. Her husband and son were still in the house. It haunts me because I couldn't save them. The flames were so hot that it started to melt my jacket just being near it. The screams from not only the woman, but also the son and dad being burned alive was absolutely haunting. It didn't even sound human. EMTs, firefighters, cops, and other emergency workers deal with some really rough things. Thank you for saving lives and helping our community. Hey everyone, I'm a volunteer firefighter. This story happened to me last week. So, our fire department works with EMS and CPR calls, heart attack calls. And we got a call of one last week, and it was around 1 a.m. and we were driving to the call. We had then noticed that there was only one light on in the house, and we got out of the truck and stuff. We went to the door and opened it since it was unlocked, and then went upstairs because that's where the caller stated the patient was. We went to that room where the patient was and noticed something off. The bedroom had a door on the left that was the closest, and the door to enter that room. When we entered that room, I looked into the closet and I noticed someone holding a handgun. I told the other firefighter about it and called for police and to bring the patient to a safe place. The police that arrived searched the house and then found a dead body in another room and in the closet of the family. That's the end of my story. The guy did end up getting arrested, but I'm not really sure what happened after that. EMT here, not a medic. This one fucked me up for a bit. It makes me much more of a cautious driver. Some teenagers with Mustangs decided to race each other down the highway at 1 a.m. They end up losing control at insane speeds and initially bumping each other, sending the car in the right lane off into the trees. The driver somehow survived and was medevaced out in critical condition. Car in the left lane went over the guardrail median and head first into a Jeep, then caught on fire. We got on scene and found the now extinguished burnt mess of the wreck. The passengers of the Mustang were just carbon stacks. No bodily or facial recognition whatsoever, just charred masses of what used to be people. The driver of the Jeep was severed in half, torso hanging out of the driver's side window, legs still by the pedals, and the organs everywhere in the seat. The worst part of this was the driver of the Jeep was just minding his own business, driving along to wherever he was going. All because some kids decided to be idiots. His life was over in a split second. It's just so sad. Former EMT, less than 1 year as an on-call, 3 years as beach EMT/lifeguard. This is the call that made me quit. My unit gets called to a multi-car collision on the interstate. We arrive to a sedan on its side in the right-hand lane and an SUV in the median over the top of the cable stop. 2 men and 1 female adult are walking around with minor scrapes. The woman is hysterical though. Fire rescue was working on the SUV. When it rolled, it had landed on the post, perfectly squishing the child in the center car seat. The 5-year-old sister was pinned by the neck and waist to the seat, and the 7-year-old brother was decapitated, with his head sitting on the roof, basically looking at his younger sister. I removed the head and talked to the little girl, who was the same age of my daughter at the time, telling her she would be okay. Fire rescue cut the cables to release her from the seat, and because there was tension on the cables, they moved and basically sliced her in half. She didn't make it to the 20 feet of the ambulance. Literally died in my arms. I've shared this story many times with people with encouragement from my therapist. Also, thank you to those who still serve as first response. I commend your ability to keep going in the face of so much trauma. My brother is a paramedic, and in the city he works, it requires an officer to go with them when they arrive on the scene due to some of the violence. They were called by the police to come and help a naked, distressed male covered in blood and was wandering around the street yelling at cars and carrying a knife. When they arrived, they were met with the officer who said that the guy was dragging 2 naked children down the road before he tried to throw them into traffic, and that the man ran down the road to yell at cars. The officer called for more backup to confront the man, and my brother called the fire chief to get more people to help handle the kids, and to also stand by if any of the officers got injured by the man. Within about 10 minutes, there were 5 officers, my brother as partner, the fire chief, and about 2 more paramedics, so 10 men in total. The police coaxed the man to get near the ambulance so that they can assess if he was injured and require immediate attention. The man was put on a gurney and he was taken to my brother's ambulance to be assessed. In the ambulance, my brother, the initial officer, and my brother's partner all sat in the back to check out the man. In the instant my brother closed the door, the man decided to get belligerent. He punched my brother in the nose and lunged for the officer's gun. The partner and my brother hit their panic buttons on their radios. They give off an alert to any of the units in the area to respond. The officer gets a handcuff around the guy's hand, but can't attach it to anything because the guy has superhuman strength due to being methed out of his mind. The back doors to the ambulance opens, and there's the other 4 officers, the fire chief, and the other 2 paramedics, and all 7 guys dive onto the meth guy and attempt to restrain him. The fire chief got hit with the wild handcuff in the teeth, and all 10 of them could barely keep the guy down. My brother said 2 of the officers decided to taser the man, and they finally got him restrained to the gurney. He was given a sedative, and 2 of the officers had to ride in the back of the ambulance with their tasers out, just to make sure he didn't try anything. Once they dropped off the man to the hospital, all the officers, paramedics, and anyone who was in contact with the man was quarantined in a ward for several hours. Apparently the guy was in contact with caustic and dangerous chemicals from making meth in his apartment, and anyone in contact with him could be carrying the same chemicals around in their clothes. Remember how he was naked when they found him? Him, his kids, and his wife were all naked because he was making meth in his apartment. His wife had complained that she didn't want him making meth anymore, so he beat the shit out of her, thus getting covered in her blood. He was so angry that he decided he was going to kill his kids and drag them outside, when he was then confronted by the officer. Now, I'm not that familiar with the laws around creating meth or hard drugs, but apparently when charged with creating methamphetamine, you get charges against you for every person living in that building that is put in danger. He lived in an apartment building with over 100 people in it, so 100 people were in danger of him making meth, and so he was charged for putting all of them in danger. He was also then charged with assault on officers, aggravated assault, resisting arrest, 3 counts of attempted murder, and cooking meth, with a really huge sentence. Not EMS, but I have some training as a first responder as military police. I was back home after doing a 2-month stint with my National Guard unit. About 2 days later, some kid gets shot right outside my house, and my cousin and I immediately start giving him first aid to deal with the wounds. We thought we plugged up all the holes, but we found out that we missed one exit wound that was right around his lower back, and the kid had heavy hemorrhaging. I remember the kid just staring me in the eyes as that spark just faded away from him. Blamed myself for about 5 years not being thorough enough when checking for wounds and turned to drinking to cope for a time. I'm in therapy now for it, and I haven't touched the bottle in almost a month now. I was talking to a patient who we'd been called to take into a 5150 hold for a 24-hour psych evaluation by the local PD. He was a big guy, and he was holding a small Hello Kitty flip phone and crying about his daughter. When I got to explaining what we would be doing, he pulled out a pistol and shot himself. I got a mouthful of brain and skull ricochet from the cargo container that he was leaning against. Yeah, local PD. He's very clear of weapons. Good job. Former paramedic of 15 years. I've posted this before on here, but the worst call I ever ran was a shaken baby. Mom couldn't get her 1-month-old baby to stop crying, so she shook him, causing massive damage to his brain. Baby went into what we call status epilepticus, which is a non-stop seizure. Then she called 911. The filth of that trailer. The smell, human feces, old rotting pizza boxes, cat shit, overwhelming cat urine ammonia smell, dirty diapers, needles, and so many cigarette butts. It still really haunts me to this day. This helpless infant writhing in this filth, while the mom made a Pop-Tart in the midst of the suffering she caused. That call permanently changed me. I'm okay with answering this question in this forum, as it's not very personal. But please, people, don't ask this question to people who you know that work in the field. I used to get it all the time, and people always assume we're going to tell them about some gnarly injury. No, it's not the bloody injuries that cause us to drink and eat too much and sabotage our personal relationships. It's this shit. We go through very traumatic experiences. Many of us have PTSD and substance abuse disorders. You wouldn't ask a veteran about the time they watched their buddy die, would you? Please don't ask us to relive our darkest hours either. At least, not in person. Not a medic, but a first responder. I showed up first on a trouble run, and it turned out to be a shooting. Dude was hit straight in the center of his chest. He was in such a state of shock that he was probably dead already, but just didn't realize it yet. He was gray and lifeless and trying to move. It reminded me of a marionette clawing at the ground without power to move himself. He couldn't speak and was expressionless. I did a blood sweep and found he had been shot 2 times, once in the forearm and once in the side, and I would find the third very soon. There was very little blood loss externally, but internally, all of his organs were minced. His chance of survival was basically zero. He fell between a car and a pole, so I had to move the car to try and work him a little. We started CPR, but with the first compression, a volcano-like spurt of really foamy blood erupted from his mouth, caking his open eyes. He was technically still alive, but so far gone that he couldn't blink away the blood. There were small chunks of flesh mixed in with the blood, which were the pieces of his heart and lungs. It was at this time we discovered a bullet hole in the dead center of his sternum. We worked him for a very short period of time, and then they threw him in the ambulance and left. He was probably dead before the ambulance even made it off the scene. Dude was only 17 years old, but was the suspect in a homicide that had just occurred a week earlier. I'll never forget it, but what really sticks with me is just the sheer loss of potential. That kid could have done really great things with his life, but he died in a stranger's arms after retaliatory violence. I feel really sad for him sometimes whenever I think about that incident. Four to 5-year-old kid sitting on the stoop with his mom as the dad parks the car across the street as he comes home from work. Kid gets all excited and runs to the dad, right between two parked cars, and is hit and killed by some poor young lady. Worst scene ever. Two hysterical parents, one hysterical innocent young lady, and one grotesquely disfigured dead toddler. Just awful. Got a call for a jumper from a rather low bridge. Basically goes over a small waterway that isn't even deep enough for a boat with a motor on it. This was about 3 a.m. in the morning. Pull up to one cop car sitting there with his lights on reading the paper. Get out and ask the cop where our jumper is. Well, without even taking his eyes off his paper, he said, "She jumped 3 times. Now she's just sitting down there in the water." I looked over the side, and sure as shit, some cracked out lady's just sitting in the water. I asked her how she was doing, and she just said, "Tell him not to shoot me." Turns out she jumped when the cop arrived, walked over to the other side, and came back up on the bridge. And as the cop got close, she jumped again and again, doing the same thing. After she jumped the 3rd time, the cop told her to sit there and wait for us, and if she got out of the water, he was going to shoot her. Well, I guess it worked. Met with PD to pick up a psych patient they found trying to kick in an apartment's front door. Now, I love psych patients. Not being cruel, but they're really fun. Some of them. This particular dude was top-notch fun. We ended up transporting him to the hospital for a psych eval, and he had some blood on him that he wasn't sure where it came from. Rode with him in the back of the ambulance, just talking away about all the crazy shit in his head. Really seemed like an alright guy, all things considered. After we dropped him off at the hospital, he told the psych doc he was all bloody because he beat his girlfriend to death, and then when the cops found him, he was trying to get into his mother's building to kill her too. His story 100% checked out. So yeah, kiddos, never judge a book by its cover.